We're going to make some cleats today, and this is our fella. I'm sure you can see him. The main tool that we're going to use is the MT300 Proxon Shaper. It has an adjustable fence and you can turn it around, and if you have deep pieces, use it from the other side. There are lots of videos online that will take you through the operations of this, so I'm not going to really repeat that. It is a fantastic tabletop tool and I've found it very useful in my shop. You will find lots of bits that work with the tool. Proxon supply you bits, but all of the Dremel router bits will work with this tool once the shank is the same. Let's get started and make these cleats. We've cut a piece of juniper that is just over 11 millimeters wide and 2.7 millimeters thick, so we have a little playing room. And juniper is a very tight grain wood. If this works out well, I'll stay with this. I then have two steps above that. One is to use green heart, which I am a little wary of because it's brittle. And failing that, I know it'll work, is some Wamara, which is extremely hard. But I really want to preserve my Wamara for things that are important like wheels. The most important thing in cutting the blanks is to determine the grain. In this case it's this way, so that the blanks would actually be cut off this side, so that when we are slicing the finished piece, the grain will be running this way on the blank and not this way. These are the details of the cleat, and we're going to go up to the top one here. 11 millimeters wide. The height is 2.4, but we're going to increase that to 2.7. If you come down here, you'll notice that this cleat bends down. We're going to make it more like this, which is sort of straighter, because we'll have trouble getting the ropes underneath the cleats. These are some other ones either I made or I got them from kits. And this will really show you the one that we've already made up. You should be very careful when moving the blank through the machine, not to cut your fingers. And the blank should also be pressed hard against the fence, because it has a tendency to kick out when you're using small pieces like this, so be very careful. Now we're going to try some green heart and see if this works any better. We're using a perfectly round Dremel bit to do all the carving and cutting this morning. We've cut the center of the cleat, the top center. The piece would have been cut like this. So now we're going to turn it over because we want to cut a curve on this side and a curve on this side. And a lot of challenges with the size of the green heart blanks. And I would really recommend using as long a blank as possible to give you more control, because it's very difficult to use push sticks on the machine. You should try to do all the cleanup on the main blank, because it's very easy to hold in place, and when you get the individual cleats done, it's almost impossible to clean them. So spend time on the major blanks, so that when you in fact cut the various pieces out, as we're doing here on the Priya, that all the cleanup work is done. In total, between the two pieces of wood, we were able to get well over 50 cleats. And these are the green heart cleats, and they really were not a problem. So I think the green heart is an excellent wood for making small parts or cleats. So we're just going to stick two of these just to give you an idea. Again, using some CA. We have pre-drilled the holes. And there we go. This is the first batch of completed cleats. They have been sanded and we've rubbed some poly wipe on the first coat. Tomorrow morning we'll put a light sanding on them and then put one last coat of poly before installing on the boat. The process is the same as we've covered before, is you put it on with a brush and then wipe it off with a thin piece of cotton cloth. So now we proceed with putting the cleats on, and again the only thing to be careful of is to take off any excess glue, which we've done with a hard brush. One of the errors, sequencing errors we made, is that we should have put these cleats in on the bowsprit before we put the bowsprit in, which also means it will have to be put in this way, because we've had to drill this at an angle. So we've made up a few of these at an angle, and we'll get them in so you won't notice, but just a note about sequencing of certain things. We really struggled with the installation of the bobstay chain plate, simply because the typical piece of brass that you would use on the rudder, you had a compound bend to take the angle of the bow. And after a little bit of thought, we realized we had to use heat, and so we whipped out the old blowtorch, heated it up, and took our time and eventually got it bent. We used epoxy to stick the brass piece onto the hull and onto the other copper plates, and we soldered the little rings that attach the chain plate to the bowsprit. It was a bit challenging, but all in all, we were happy with the end result. There are 4 wooden belaying cleats that attach to the bulwark. We painted these beforehand, just to minimize the amount of paint on the model. And I think the only thing to be careful of is to remember to remove the paint on the bulwark stanchions, because you want a wood-to-wood join. Wood to paint is not a really good long-term solution. We used CA to glue the pieces because we didn't want any movement once we put them in place. We now go to the stern of the boat where we install the sheet jib boom, which today would be referred to as a traveller. And then finally, the last of the cleats are the side belaying cleats. Perhaps the only thing to be very careful of is when drilling, to take the cleat itself, that you don't drill through the hull. You have 6 of these cleats to attach to the bulwark. The final set of deck fittings to put on are the single blocks, and there are many ways to do this. In this case, I've decided to use very thin wire, wrap around the block, and then pass the wire through the pins that hold them into the deck. And I've actually soldered these. I may change this before the final display, but this is my chosen method and it seems to work pretty good. So all in all, very happy to finally reach the end of the hull of the boat. In the next video, we'll start tackling the rigging.